Welcome. You listen to 360 Info. I'm your host, Hamtonio. To manipulate history is to manipulate consciousness. And to manipulate consciousness is to manipulate possibilities. And to manipulate possibilities is to manipulate power. Welcome to the show. Got a great show for you today. We're gonna have a power December. The Truth series is going to go through December. This is what's going to happen in December. So you guys better tune in and tell people to tune in. We got a dynamic brother on today. I'm always talking about him because he's one of the few that is doing what he's doing in Egypt, but possibly the only person of color doing what he's doing in Egypt. So I brag about him and talk about him all the time. We got the great Anthony Browder on today. It's gonna be a great show. We're gonna chop it up, dialogue, and just get some of his views on what's going on in Africa, what we should be doing here, and talk about some of the things that he has going on that you might can connect with him. Great show for you today. The weather's kind of cold in Cleveland. It was brutal Thursday and Friday for us, but we coming up out of it. The sun is shining a little bit now. We're just gonna get some mid-30 temperatures, and it's winter time. It's winter time, and we'll deal with it. In the remote studio, we got our good brother Vince. What's going on, Vince?
Well, we are in the midst of December, and of course, that means in a few weeks we will be celebrating Kwanzaa. We will get an early start, however, on Tuesday. I'll be officiating Kwanzaa over at the East End Neighborhood House, and that will begin at 5:30. Also, just wanted to let the community know that we will commemorate Kuumba at Kings and Queens of Art, and that will be on December 31st at 3 p.m. So check out the calendar the Greater Cleveland Kwanzaa Alliance puts out, and you'll get all the details about that. You can also go to the Larchmere Arts Facebook page. We'll be co-sponsoring that along with Kings and Queens of Art. And as you said, Brother Hamtonio, really excited about the show that we're going to do today with Brother Tony Browder, known to some as Anthony T. Browder. And I'm telling you, as you said, brother, very few people on the planet are engaged as he is. He is an author, a publisher, cultural historian, artist, and educational consultant. He's a graduate of Howard University's College of Fine Arts, and he's lectured extensively throughout the United States, Africa, Caribbean, Mexico, Japan, and Europe. He is the founder and director of IKG Cultural Resources and has devoted almost 50 years researching ancient Egyptian history, science, philosophy, and culture. He's the first African American to fund and coordinate an archaeological dig in Egypt and has led over 30 archaeological missions to Egypt since 2009. His latest publication, Finding Karakamoon, documents 15 years of excavations, restorations, and discoveries. With that, we welcome the 360 Info Network, Brother Tony Browder. How you doing this morning, brother?
Well, I got up. I'm able to sit up and have conversation with two intelligent brothers. So I'm doing well. I'm betting 1,000. So far, so good.
All right, Antonio.
Yeah, that's a good thing, brother. Like I said before, I be bragging about you all the time, brother. I'll be bragging about. I say, yeah, man, I know one of the brothers that's about the only brother in the country that's over there. I say that sometimes when they try to bring up when we having a discussion about some things and you got to talk some facts. Let's talk about what's going on the ground and who do you know to have some boots on the ground that can validate or discount or whatever what we're talking about here. And of course, most of the time, the people that you get into debates here cannot really substantiate anything worth talking about because they heard some stuff on Discovery Channel or something to that nature, and really can't have a good dialogue on any subject matter. Because I've learned. All you know is all you know. And you can't get this more than what somebody have in them and trying to get them to educate themselves about some things. But my brother, we want to get your take on what's going on because I've been talking about it all the time. And maybe sometimes, people get weary of the same person keep saying we need to make some connections to Africa. We need to be paying attention to what's going on in Africa because to me personally, it's a match made in heaven, and it could be a match made in heaven, and we should be really connecting ourselves with it. And I think it's our salvation for our babies in the future. What's your thought on that?
Well, it's important that we understand certain information that has never made its way into the general public. 90% of what we know about history in general, African history in particular, Kemetic or Egyptian history specifically, is wrong, flat out wrong.
Wow.
And you cannot make intelligent decisions about anything if you're operating off of inaccurate or erroneous information. That's just the truth of life itself. So one of the reasons why so many people of African descent living in America have no real appreciation for Africa is because of how we've been socialized, how we've been brainwashed. We've been mentally manipulated since the time we were in the womb to believe that Africa had made no significant contribution to culture, civilization, history, or humanity. When in fact, if one were to take a few moments to just look at what Africa has given the world from a non-judgmental point of view, just look at the facts. The facts are very simply, brothers, that 300,000 years ago, people living in Africa were the only human beings on the planet. That's been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. Africa is the birthplace of humanity. We also know that approximately 65,000 years ago, a group of Africans walked out of the continent, northeast part of the continent, and began populating the landmass that we now refer to as Asia. We also know that approximately 40,000 years ago, another group of Africans living in the northeastern part of the continent walked again out of Africa into the western part of the continent of Asia, the landmass that we now refer to as Europe, and populated Europe. These are irrefutable historical anthropological facts, genetic facts beyond a shadow of a doubt. Nobody with a sane mind could refute any of those facts. So if you process that, if you synthesize just those three small pieces of information, then what that means is Africa is the birthplace of humanity, which geneticists have already proven. The first people in Asia were Africans. The first people in Europe were Africans. And ultimately, these African people wound up populating the entire population of the planet Earth, which means then that everybody on this planet is of African ancestry, whether they realize it or not, whether they look like they're of African descent or not. And so geneticists have been able to prove that fact by studying the mitochondrial DNA, which is that part of everybody's cell structure, which is passed on to every person by their mother. So the mitochondrial DNA that people in any part of the planet living today carry within their DNA can be traced back to a group of women who are still living in Africa today. So since everybody on this planet is of African descent, why do we carry such a negative perception of Africa in our mind? And that is because of outsiders, of invaders who have come into Africa and stole people for approximately 1,300 years. And when they decided to stop stealing people, they decided to start stealing the resources of that continent, which continues to this very day. Africa is one of the most mineral-rich continents on the planet. One cannot have a technologically sophisticated country without minerals and resources that make this form of communication possible. All of our electronic devices require minerals that are mined in Africa and processed outside of Africa, and then those products are sold to African people. So everything centers around knowledge and power, right? Knowledge and power. And so those who have the knowledge will create systems in order to maintain knowledge, which then gives them power. And whenever they are threatened by the powerless, they change the game. And so what we're seeing in Africa, what we're seeing in America right now, are efforts on the part of powerful people to shift the game, because they feel threatened by powerless people beginning to take power away from them. That's, to be perfectly honest with you, brothers, that's the game that's been played for well over 2,000 years. This is nothing new. If you're a student of history, you'll see the patterns. You'll understand the cycles in history, and you know where you are, you know how you got here, and you have a pretty good idea of what's coming next, so that if you're wise, you can prepare yourself for the next phase. Like you mentioned, Antonio, you mentioned that it was cold. It's cold because it's winter. And next week is the winter solstice, the beginning of the season of winter. We're going to have 90 days of winter. After winter comes spring. So no one in their right mind would plant their garden at the beginning of winter. You have to know where you are. You have to understand what the cycles are. And then you have to move judiciously during each of those cycles in order to maximize the outcome. And, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, we only know what we know. And if we live in a society which limits what you know, then once you realize those limitations have been placed on you, it makes perfectly good sense for you to begin to learn outside of the formal systems of education.
Come on, man. Come on,
I
brother.
know what I know because I realized after I graduated from college, I was blessed. After I graduated from college, I realized that I had been miseducated. I realized that I did not have the mental tools, the emotional tools, the psychological tools, the historical tools that I would need in order to make my way through life as a person of African ancestry living here in America. And I was fortunate in that I encountered brothers and sisters who knew more than I did and who saw something of value in me, and they shared their wisdom with me. And so that's when my real education began, outside of the formal classroom. And I am who I am today because of my relationship with elders, many of whom are now ancestors. And I find myself playing the same role with others that they play with me. And that is to share what I know with those who are interested in listening to what I have to say. And more importantly, brother, have the capacity to understand what I'm trying to say, because this is a quest that not everybody is suited for. And as they say it in the Bible, you don't cast your pearls before swine. You know, people have to appreciate the value of what you have to offer, and they have to be able to respond to the information that's been given to them. And then you watch their response to make sure they're using the information correctly. If so, you continue to provide them with information. If not, you cut them off and you move on because you're wasting time, you're wasting air. So I know that was a long answer to a short question. You know, I have a tendency to talk a lot. So if you want me to shift, then just give me the terminate sign.
No. Yeah, you got something, Vince? Look like you're pondering something there. Oh.
I just wanted to ask, in light of what you were saying about us having been here before, you know, we're transitioning to a new power structure in Washington, which is where you are. Absolutely. And, you know, we're talking about education and how vital and important it is to us, and the information and the knowledge that we have about ourselves that's missing from the education system. And now we're in a place where they want to push back on us knowing even more about ourselves. From your position as an educator, where do we go from here? Because they're doing massive reform in the field of education, talking about eliminating the federal Department of Education. Sure. So where do we go from here?
Well, look, I've been doing this work for 48 years. So I've been around the block a while. I've seen the patterns, I've seen the cycles. And what I know from my own personal experiences is that I do better business-wise. And what I do is a business. I'm in the business of studying the history of African people and sharing that information with those who want to know. That's been my business for 48 years. And what I know as a fact is that my business does better whenever Republicans are in office. Why is that? Because we don't understand the political game. Politics is a game. And we believe that Democrats are going to take care of us. The government is going to take care of us. Neither the Democrats or the Republicans really give a damn about us. They care about themselves. They care about those people who fund their campaigns. And so when Republicans get in office, Black folk have a tendency to get afraid because they know the history of the Republicans and they know that no good is coming their way. And so they then become interested in hearing from someone like me, right? Because I've been talking this African stuff and I'm still around talking this African stuff, and there must be something to it. So interest in what I'm doing always increases during Republican administrations. And now the stuff is about to hit the fan. There's no question about it. The incoming president of the United States, I call him 93, like 45 and 47 is 93, right? So he has been put in office. He is a non-traditional he ain't a politician. He's a hustler. He's a con man. He's like the Wizard of Oz. He would tell you whatever he thinks you need to hear.
Say it again, bro.
For him to get your power, your energy. And that's the game that's at play right now. And so ultimately, if we understand what Dr. King really meant back in 1965 when he was standing on the steps of the Montgomery courthouse and said that the arc of the moral universe is long and it bends towards justice. What he was really talking about from a cultural perspective, he was talking about Newt, the Nile Valley cosmological personification of the Milky Way galaxy, and he was also talking about Ma'at. Ma'at is the barometer which, or the scales which determines the justice and truth and righteousness and things of that nature. And he was actually correct. The arc of the moral universe is like the body of Newt. It spans across the earth, and it does follow a certain pattern. And that what we're witnessing right now is the beginning of the end of America as we know it. That's what the incoming president represents, the beginning of the end. And as we monitor and track what will happen between now and next year, we would have a conversation a year from today, brothers. You all will co-sign on what I'm sharing with you right now. The incoming president of the United States is a confirmation of the fact that karma is real.
Come on, man.
You reap what you sow. And this nation has been given numerous opportunities to do right, to get it right. And they have consistently chosen to do wrong. Evil has consistently won and appears to be in the home stretch right now. And so the reality is, if you really understand histories of nations, the rise and falls of nations, then we're standing on the precipice of one of the biggest shifts in power that the United States has ever seen, that the world has ever seen. And it's going to bring into existence a rapid decline. The Rome fell, Greece fell, England fell, Germany fell, and now it's the United States time to fall. And so, it brings to mind to me what Reverend Jeremiah Wright said well over a decade ago: God damn America. And God is going to, if there is a God, if there is a righteous God, then a righteous God would damn this country for being responsible for most of the wars on this planet, for destroying tens of thousands of children and babies in Gaza, for funding wars in Ukraine and Syria and other parts of the world, while people in this country are starving. I've never seen so many poor people on the streets of America than I have within the last 5 years. So what is this thing about? It's all about maintaining war, maintaining confusion, maintaining evil and destruction, and the people be damned. So this system cannot continue at its current pace. It's going to reach a head. And I feel very strongly that the incoming president and his administration, they're going to drive this bus straight to hell.
Come on, man.
Given that reality, what I want us to realize is that you can always get off the bus. You have options. And in order to, one, realize you have options, and two, know what your options are, And 3, have the presence of mind to exercise those options. You have to be a student of history. You have to have an understanding and appreciation for African culture, for African sacred science, or what some people refer to as African spirituality. And if you and that's one of the reasons why I've been obsessed, and that's probably the best way to describe it. I've been obsessed with studies of Nile Valley civilization. I've been to Egypt 68 times over the past 44 years. I've been involved in funding and participating in archaeological excavations in Egypt for the past 15 years. I have access to knowledge which 99.9% of the people on the planet don't even know exists. And what is important for me at this particular point in time in my life is to share this information with those worthy of sharing this information with, because I ain't casting my pearls before swine. You know, we are in a crisis situation and we need all hands on deck. And those hands must be willing to work. They must be willing to invest, not just in this life, but in the future lives to come, which means you have to have a broader understanding of what life is. And you have to be willing, you have to have the strength and the wisdom to step out of the limitations that have been imposed upon us by the 3 religions of the Abrahamic faith. If you understand what most people in this planet understand, that there is no death. We come back. You know, the body is temporary, but the soul or the spirit is eternal. And the soul comes back into another body in order to continue your mission on earth. We are here on earth for a specific reason. Every person is born with talents and gifts and abilities that nobody else has. And the purpose of a meaningful society is to receive these new spirits into the world, to make sure that you're properly fed, you're properly housed, you're properly educated, so that you can maximize your gift and enhance the quality of life. That's why we're here. So when we look at civilizations in Africa that understood this and maintained this relationship, we see that they were able to make incredible progress. They were able to have advanced civilizations that we today in the 21st century are scratching our head. As smart as we think we are, many realize that we don't have 1/10 of the knowledge that the ancients have. And as a consequence, we're in the shape that we're in. And so my position is at this particular point in my life is that we don't have to suffer. We don't have to go down with the ship. There's information that is available to those who seek it. And that information can save your life in this lifetime. And it could also save your life in lifetimes to come. Wow. I know that this is a conversation that most people aren't prepared to listen to, let alone understand, but eventually you will. And you only have the rest of your lives to do so. So you get it now, you get it later. It's up to you.
Right. Hey, brother, I got to jump in here. I got to jump in. What you said, brother, you put it together so elegant. And people watching this show would know I've been saying the same doggone thing. The same thing about it. I don't know if it's proper to say how I describe it. I said because it don't make logical sense about 93 winning and people being swayed like this. I said this is divine order. I call it divine order. It is the tipping point of what's going on. And you said it so great. Is if you understand history and you look at history, you'll see you don't stay on top forever. Nobody stay on top forever, and it's the fall. And also, I want to kind of go back a little bit and touch on what you said about and setting up and giving the backdrop of all that history, all that knowledge, all that science, and the longevity that we have been here around here doing it, and it just trips me out to where most of us, we can't put historical breadcrumbs together to say, was these people walking around twiddling their thumbs just waiting for Europeans to come down and educate them? You know what I mean? And it seems like we can't. Come on, man. And you see on places like Discovery Channel and things like that, they never talk about Ma'at. You never hear them talking about it. And I think if they did and got into the 42 decorations of life and all that kind of stuff, they would start seeing the connection they would see like, wait a minute now, how can these laws be there? And we was taught that Moses gave us these laws. See, and so I just find it strange, and it might be that socialization that talked about in the beginning, that why we've been socialized out of really paying any attention to Africa. But I just find it strange where people say we free, but our mind's not free, that they can't make that connection and think that since we've been here, we had to know God and spirituality first. And there's some jewels over there for us to learn how to move forward.
Yeah.
Ancestors are saying, you tried everybody else, but when are you going to try me?
Well, given what we've gone through as a people, it's not surprising that we find ourselves in the shape that we're in. No one on the planet has endured what people of African ancestry have endured on this continent over the past 400 years. Nobody. And the mere fact that we're still here, the mere fact that when given a reasonably fair opportunity, we have a tendency to rise to the top. We have a tendency to outpace others who've had an advantage over us. Why is that? That is because of a power that we were all born with. And that power I've come to acknowledge as ancestral intelligence. Ancestral intelligence. Ancestral intelligence is the knowledge that we are a continuation of our ancestors, that there exists within us a capacity to tap into a stream of ancestral intelligence that knows the answers to every problem that any human being will ever encounter, because problems are not new. These problems are cyclical and they change with certain circumstances, but the problems are basically the same. And that people who have cultivated this ancestral intelligence are people that we commonly refer to as geniuses, which implies that this is a person who has tapped into their genetic memory, and they now are able to access an archive, a database that stretches back hundreds, maybe thousands of years, and can provide a person who is in tune with themselves the solutions to any problem that they have. So in this context, in this larger understanding concept, then ancestral intelligence is the only AI that should matter to people of African ancestry. It has been our saving grace. It is our superpower. So you cannot expect a nation that has been responsible for stealing your ancestors, enslaving your ancestors, and raping your ancestors, and killing the indigenous population on this planet to teach you this information or even validate its existence. That is not in their wheelhouse. It's our responsibility. And so, as I mentioned previously at the top of the show, what I found is that whenever we're in deep trouble, there's something within our people that prompts them to begin to turn back towards Africa, right? To begin to seek out the books that have been written by people who have an appreciation for African history and culture. And for those who are ready to act on that insight, they will receive benefits. But also, given where we are and how we've been socialized, the vast majority of the people that we care about, the people that we love, the vast majority of them will not make it. And while it may make you sad on one end, what gives me comfort is knowing that there is no end. And let me say this, and I might tick off some people, but if I do, you shouldn't have been listening to this show in the first place. There is no heaven or hell, right? That we come back. And trust me when I say this, there are people within the three Abrahamic faiths who are at the upper echelons of those faiths who know that there is no heaven or hell, who know that heaven and hell is a state of mind that exists here on earth, and that the knowledge you have and the application of that knowledge determines whether or not you will experience heaven or hell on earth. People know that, but they're not going to share with the general public. Why? Because if you knew better, they couldn't manipulate you, right? They couldn't get their tithes. They wouldn't be able to take advantage of you financially with with exorbitant interest rates. You would know how to master your domain such that you would not be in debt to someone, and you would be able to make reasonable contributions to your family first, to your community second, to your nation third. That's how the process should be. But this current society that we're living in is not one that is attuned to ma'at, brother. It's not in tune to those ideas that express truth and justice and righteousness, balance, harmony, order, and reciprocity. So in order for the cycle to change, the dominant power must fall. And the fall is coming. The fall is inevitable. The fall is inevitable, just like fall, the season we're in now, is inevitably going to give way to the season that's coming up next week, which is winter. And winter is going to have its day, 90 days. And then winter is going to give way to spring. Spring is going to have 90 days. Spring is going to give way to summer. And that's the cycle. That's the pattern. So once you understand that we live in a universe, in a multiverse, if you will, cycles upon cycles upon cycles upon cycles, large cycles, larger cycles, enormous cycles. And once you understand how we fit into all of these cycles, and that human beings have the capacity to tap into this power, this knowledge, and use our skills to create wonderful things that can benefit humanity. That's who we are. And when we were free to exercise this knowledge, we made the world a better place. But then the world was turned upside down, and there's many different reasons about how and why the world was thrown off track. But those are the cycles, those are the patterns. And so I'm having a conversation with two brothers now who obviously have an understanding of that. And the question now becomes, as we begin to fight for our lives, our very existence, the question now is, how many people will be willing to come together, put aside petty differences, put aside fear and ignorance, and work with people who have a plan, people who have a foundation based on that which is truthful, that which is built on knowledge, that which can give you specific benefits based on the track record that's been accumulated, and carve out a zone of safety for yourself and your family as we prepare to go through some of the most trying times that people in America have ever experienced. It's coming. It's inevitable. Yeah, Vince. I see you're chopping at the bit.
Yeah. I just had to get to a couple of things. First of all, I'm reflecting on a recording that you did with Rock Newman years ago, where you broke down the winter solstice, and I want you to give that to our listeners today. But I also want to get back to what you mentioned about the Abrahamic religions, because they all have their origins in Nile Valley civilization. And I just find it interesting that we can be so stuck on carbon copies as opposed to dealing with the original and understanding it in its full context. One of the things that happened with the implementation of those religions is that we shifted the idea of all of us being gods to just one person being God. And I think that that was a paradigm shift that really took away the momentum that we had as people who lived in that civilization, with an awareness of our power tied to the 42 declarations of freedom from sin that Brother Antonio brought up. So if you could, just for the benefit of the listeners and the viewers who are watching us on YouTube and Facebook, talk about the significance of the winter solstice, talk about how intricate that building was of that pyramid, and all of the implications that go along with the solstice, and how this idea of infinite life, because you said we don't die, we just transition. You didn't use those words, but essentially we live forever. So if you could just bring it home for the folks who are listening and watching.
All right, that's a tall order, and I'm going to do that in under 7 minutes, right? So the basic reality is that, as you made reference to the three Abrahamic faiths, they represent a fraction of the African spiritual knowledge that existed within the Nile Valley for tens of thousands of years.
Wow.
They took a fraction of that information, and
Wow.
because of their limited understanding of how that knowledge had been accumulated and applied, they then saw God or the Creator as a wicked person, as an enemy, as someone who persecuted them. So the essence, as I have come to understand it, is that we are not God. God is a European term. The term that was used in the Nile Valley was netur. Netur represents a principle or aspect of divinity. It is from the word netur that we have derived the word nature. So netur expresses itself in everything: the air, the water, the soil. Everything is an aspect of this one source, and the mind of man is too small to comprehend the totality of this creative force. But by understanding and by examining and understanding the various manifestations of it, the air, the water, the plants, the animals, then we can come to know how this power expresses itself within our environment. So in that context, brother, we are not God, but we contain the aspect of the Creator within us.
Yes.
And by understanding these aspects, by combining this knowledge, helps us to see a larger portion of who we are. And then we act on what we know. And then we have the capacity to create wonderful things. So within that context, these people studied the heavens. They saw the sun rose in the east and set in the west. The east became associated with life. The west became associated with death. They saw the moon go through its phases every 29 days. And so they began to plot the movements of the sun, the moon, stars, and planets. And they noticed that when these heavenly bodies were in a certain position, that they followed certain patterns, cyclical patterns. And when they were in certain positions, then certain phenomena would happen on Earth. So they compiled this information over thousands of years of observation and record keeping. And then they passed this information on to future generations. And as a consequence of these observations, we know that Africans in the Nile Valley developed the first calendar of 365 and a quarter days in the year 4230 BC. We know that as a fact. And then they also realized that whenever certain constellations appeared in the sky before sunrise, that the Nile River would flood, and that it was the annual flooding of the Nile that made life possible within the Nile Valley. And so they saw a direct cause and effect relationship between bodies in the heavens and activities on Earth. So they just compiled this information, and they created institutions and organizations to share this information with the general public. So what you're dealing with is, back in ancient times, the vast majority of people were illiterate. They couldn't read. They were farmers, they were workers, they were laborers, which meant that you had a class of people who did the studying, who were the scholars, who were the scientists, who were the thinkers, who were the philosophers, who were the teachers, who were the healers. And then you had a government ruled by a king, queen, or royalty, and they had layers of civil servants, if you will, who administered to their nations. And so there had to be systems in place from the top to the bottom where everyone could understand what was at stake and your role in maintaining the status quo. So concepts, these profound scientific and spiritual concepts, had to be diminished into myths and easy to understand symbols that the average undereducated person could relate to. And so the sun was a symbol of life. The sun was a symbol of creation. And so the sun then became the primary symbol for God, what we call today God. So to take this general information and apply it to the winter solstice, it takes the Earth 365 and a quarter days to revolve around the sun. And as the Earth revolves around the sun, it tilts on its axis, right? It wobbles as it tilts on its axis. And it's the tilting of the axis during 4 quarters of the year that give us the 4 seasons of the year. We have 2 solstices and 2 equinoxes. The word solstice means the sun is still, We have the summer solstice and the winter solstice. The summer solstice is the longest day of the year, in which we here in Washington, D.C. have 19 hours of sunlight. The winter solstice is the shortest day of the year, where here in D.C. we have about 9 hours of sunlight. The two equinoxes are the two time frames as the earth revolves around the sun, spinning on its axis, that we have equal night and equal day. That's March 21st and September 21st is the time frame of the equinoxes. So it's this interplay between light and dark, sunlight that brings energy in life, that takes away energy in life. So those two extremes were expressed as good and evil, were expressed as God and the devil. So as we're moving into fall, where the days get shorter, we're moving into a time of darkness. Darkness represents the absence of the life force, right? And the presence of evil, if you will, if you're superstitious. And so we reach the winter solstice, which is next week, where we have the day of maximum darkness. And so during the solstice, when the sun is still for 4 days, the length of the day does not increase nor decrease significantly for 4 days. Then after those 4 days of the solstice, December 21st, December 22nd, December 23rd, December 24th, after the fourth day, then the length of the day begins to increase by a minute per day. Thus, on December the 25th, it was said that the sun was born, right? And the days get longer and continue to get longer until March 21st, when we have the equinox, 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of nighttime, when the sun then passes over the equator, and then the days get even longer still, right? So December 25th was a time frame where when rulers began to take spiritual knowledge that had been developed in the Nile Valley and use that as a system for controlling the masses of people, and they called it religion. They fabricated this belief that human beings were born in sin. And as a result of our sin, we were kicked out of the Garden of Eden. And as a result of our sins, we were all going to die and go to hell or heaven, depending on how we worship this entity known as God. So it's a way of controlling people through fear, through manipulation. And as Dick Gregory often said, fear is the absence of God, right? Fear is the absence of your ability to tap into something that we all have access to. And so we're being manipulated for the benefit of a handful of people, which is why during the season between Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve, or the day after Thanksgiving, which they call Black Friday, is when most businesses make a profit. So we are bred to be consumers. We're bred to be fearful, right? So we spend those 30 days thinking that we can buy the love of our family members and our children. So we go out and spend money we don't have to buy gifts for people that don't even like us because we aren't tapped into our humanity. And who profits? There's business people. And we're left starting a new year in worse shape than we were at the end of the year. So it's a game, it's a hustle, but not everybody understands that. Not everybody has the capacity to understand that. And as a result of our ignorance, we continue to be taken advantage of. So this season, the season of the winter solstice, is a time when we as conscious human beings who are tapped into our AI, we should be like the sun is. We should be still. This is a time when the energy, the environment, the cosmos is imbued with enhanced electromagnetic energy, which amplifies whatever your thought pattern is. So this is a time when we should be thinking about being kinder to each other. We should be thinking about taking care of our bodies, taking care of our loved ones, spending time with them, not spending money on them, but spending time with them, because your time is more valuable than gold, and learning and growing together. So these 4 days of the solstice are the best times to be still. You shouldn't be out partying. You shouldn't be out getting drunk. You shouldn't be out shopping with folk who are acting like they've lost their minds. And when you're still like the sun, you can hear the voices of your ancestors calling you, reaching out to you. Baby, you know, you haven't been doing very well this year. You've been having some heart issues. You need to change your diet. You need to look at what you've been eating. You need to exercise more. Just simple things that will help bring us back to a state of awareness and aliveness that allows us to to fulfill our reason for being born. Our lives have value. And when you know that you are connected to a universe, to a multiverse that has within its environment everything you need to thrive on this planet. I mean, it really boils down to it on that level. You don't have to pray to some invisible being for health. You need to understand what you are doing to contribute to your health or your illness and assume responsibility. And when you become a responsible, thoughtful person, when you understand that the cause and effect relationship between everything that you think, everything that you say, everything that you read, everything that you do, you realize that we are the vessels through which the creator and the ancestors express themselves through. Everything is inside. So we are not God, but we contain an aspect of the creator. We contain a direct line of communication to our ancestors who are closer to the creator than we are. So we have all these tools at our disposal that could help us live a life as fully functional human beings. But the society in which we live in cannot profit if we're healthy, cannot profit if we're intelligent. So they have done everything that they are programmed to do to spread what was referred to in the Nile Valley as isfet, confusion, evil, disorientation. And so we have an option as human beings, we have an option to either align ourselves with those forces that are good and are about the enhancement of human life, or continue to be misaligned and be subject to these nefarious forces that are going to manipulate you, hustle you, and pimp you, and rob you of your spirit to enhance themselves at your own expense because of your own ignorance. So everyone has the right to determine what they want to believe in. I'm the last person to tell you, you should believe this, you should do that. No, you should know who you are. Know your ancestry, know your history, know your culture, know how you have overcome seemingly insurmountable odds, which means that there is something inside of you which our oppressor is not obligated to teach you. There are those within your community who are telling you who you are and what you can do. And I feel very strongly that the circumstances that we're all are going to be confronted with over the next 12 months will make people realize the fundamental truths that I'm sharing with you now. And when you come to that realization, it's your opportunity to wake up, to start thinking differently and start acting differently. And then realizing, like Dorothy did in The Wizard of Oz, that you've always had the capacity to do what you wanted to do. You just didn't realize it.
Yeah.
All right. Just want to take this opportunity to let the folks listening know that you are listening to 360 Info Network with Hamptonio and Vince Robinson. Our guest is Tony Browder. He is the founder and the director of IKG Cultural Resources in the Washington, D.C. area. And we're privileged to have him on the air with us today. And I want to thank you for giving us that explanation about the solstice, because we be sleeping on the solstice. We be out there partying with the best of them. And it is a time that we should be still. We should be setting intentions and goals for the coming year. We have our dear brother, Dr. James Brown, to remind us every year. But since he's not here with us today, we got you. So thanks for carrying that message forward, Brother Hamptonio.
Yeah, as a, our spiritual family, they have some of these little nuggets, because there's, like I used to say, there's truth in the Alice in Wonderland book, So you got some of these little nuggets that folks have carried down and trying to relate to you, like what greater he that's in you than in the world. God don't dwell in temples made by hands. What is that saying? What is they talking about? When even in the Bible, when it talks about when Jesus say, and John's 10:34, saying that ye are gods. What is he talking about? In Psalms 82, yes, ye are God. So what are they saying? He's talking about the spirit and saying, I'm glad that you broke that down that particular way so we can understand it. And going back to this country, and it's something that I've said, and I'm glad yeah, again, you expounded on it a little bit about this thing called karma. You can't, and I think with Wayne, you kind of got into those principles a little bit. I seen one of the podcasts that you and Wayne was doing, and he was getting into his book, Ancient Future. People go out and buy the book with brother Wayne Chandler, Ancient Future, when you get into the seven principle hermetic text. And I think that's very foundational for folks who's really trying to understand this thing called life and navigate themselves in this thing called life. Because if you understand those principles, like you said, in cycles, brother Bauer, you see how to prepare yourself, how to navigate yourself, and you be able to see and interpret what is actually going on as we move through this thing called life, and this planet moves through the universe.
So brother, let me share this with you in light of what you just said. There's a line in the Bible that says, when I was a child, I thought like a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. I've been studying this history for a long time, and I'm not the same person that I was 5 years ago, 25 years ago, or 40 years ago when I started studying this information. My understanding of what I thought I knew has expanded. So in your referencing the Hermetic principles that Brother Wayne wrote about 25 years ago in his book, Ancient Future, he was talking about the seven principles associated with Jehudi or Hermes, right? What I've come to understand now is that Hermes or Jehudi is the netter, the principle, the creative principle that represents divine intelligence, that represents speech and writing and mathematics. Hermes or Jehudi is the male principle that represents the application of cosmic and spiritual knowledge here on the earthly plane. But what I now know is that the knowledge was given to Jehudi by his wife, Sheshet. And Sheshet is the sister who gathered knowledge of the cosmos from Nut, who I referenced earlier, who represents the Milky Way galaxy, and Ma'at, who represents the multiverse. So the essence of life as we know it comes from the feminine, the cosmic feminine. And so what we have been doing on this planet, specifically for the last 5,000 years, is we have minimized the feminine aspect of creation, and we fixated on the masculine aspect of creation, i.e. destruction. So we are out of balance. And one of the things that's required as we move into this new period is the acknowledgement of the sacred feminine that exists within all of us. And I'm not talking about a homosexual thing, or I ain't talking about none of that stuff. I'm talking about the essence of the fact that everything exists because of what Wayne mentioned in Ancient Future, duality, male and female, electrical energy, magnetic energy, the sun and the moon, water and fire. They are these opposing opposites that are really complementary and have to work together in order for life to exist. So we have been living our lives with an overabundance of male energy, which is out of balance, which is why we have so much war, which is why we have so much disease, which is why we have so much death and destruction. So it is incumbent upon us to begin to acknowledge that feminine aspect of creation, which the world needs in order to save itself. Because this white power structure, and I know we got about 4 minutes left, so let me wrap this up. This white power structure that has run the world has ruined the world. They've destroyed the water. They've destroyed the air. They've destroyed the land. They've destroyed the environment, so much so that they're now quietly beginning to acknowledge the fact that climate change is real, and that they have totally destroyed the planet, where the planet is going to be uninhabitable, which is why they're trying to develop colonies on the moon and Mars, right? So we're moving towards the precipice, and something has to shift within the consciousness of human beings in order to right this ship so that we can continue to thrive. The earth is going to be all right. The earth is going to be here. The question is whether or not we're going to be here and what state we're going to be in. So we're facing some very challenging times, but now is the time for people of goodwill to rise up, to be willing to study, to be willing to do the work so that we can prepare our children and our grandchildren for the lives that they have to live. And once we realize that we are living for them, not for our own individual selfish selves, we can begin to balance out these scales of human existence and usher in a new and timely way of living our lives.
Okay, Brother Browder, we have more than just the 3 minutes left on the radio program, and we weren't able to talk about your book and your tour. So if you can hang on for a few moments after noon, we can put that information out there for you.
Sounds good.
We are privileged to extend our broadcast beyond the radio airwaves because we have the YouTube and Facebook platform. So Brother Hamtonio, before we wrap up the radio broadcast, anything you want to share with the listeners?
Not as much. Brother Wayne, I mean, Brother Brown is just doing an excellent job in explaining and detailing this information on why we have to go ahead and look back, you know. But again, I'm just saying, and just want to encourage people just to continue if they have the ability to listen to the broadcast. That's all I would have to say at this point.
Okay. Well, for the benefit of the folks who are listening, he does have a book called Finding Karakamoon, Revised and Expanded Edition, The Collaborative Rediscovery of a Lost Tomb. You can go to the IKG website and find that under the section called Store and Books. He also has a study tour that is going to take place in July. And it is going to be from the 17th through the 26th. And again, the details for that are on the IKG website. I will post that information in the description for this video, as well as sharing it prodigiously on Facebook and YouTube. Just wanted to take a few moments also to bring folks up to date with Kwanzaa. I would encourage you to go to the Greater Cleveland Kwanzaa Alliance Facebook page. You can find it with those words. They have a calendar that is posted on that Facebook page. So if you're interested in attending any of the Kwanzaa events that are going to happen here in the Cleveland area within the next couple of weeks, you'll be able to get information on that. I know there is an event that isn't posted on that Facebook page, and that is the East End Neighborhood House. They will be doing Kwanzaa on Tuesday. And again, you can find that information in the description for this video. Also, just wanted to take an opportunity to shout out our engineer, Tone Harley. Brother Tone, you never can imagine how much we appreciate you for doing what you do to make these broadcasts possible. We took a quantum leap and went from just being on the radio to being on YouTube and Facebook every week. And he is the person who makes that possible for us. And again, we really appreciate that. And most of all, we appreciate you for sticking with us here on 360 Info Network. Brother Hamtonio, you did the great thing when you created this program. With that, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, make it a great day, Cleveland, and we will see you on the other side.
Peace.
All right. We are live on Facebook and YouTube with cultural historian, educator, author, probably a few other things he could put slashes on, but I'm sure he's a pretty modest person. So, but we thank him for all that he does. He's definitely moving the needle forward. Brother Tony, I'm thinking about this thing called the BRICS, and we talked a little bit about it in the last hour. But you know, you talk about this transition and the power struggle and all of that. And I'm going to put up the visuals for the book and the tour as we have this conversation. Just reflecting on how Muammar Gaddafi was taken out when he proposed a change to financial system. I think you could also say that Dr. King was taken out because he was threatening U.S. dollars. But I'm just curious about your thoughts about the impact that this alliance of countries that includes Egypt, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and others, what impact that's going to have on this shift that we're seeing take place now and the fall of Babylon?
Sure. Well, we were blessed last Saturday, December the 7th, to host Wayne Chandler here in D.C. And during the front end of Wayne's presentation, he was talking about the coming economic collapse. He made reference to the puppet master, the head of the World
Economic Forum.
World Economic Forum, and how these leaders gather every year to decide where they're going to spend their money, where they're going to direct their money, where the wars are going to be, where the health crises are going to be, because it's all about manipulating the environment in order to maximize profit. That's really what it boils down to. And one of the things that Dwayne has shared with the audience was something that I've been hearing a lot about. It's not necessarily my wheelhouse, so I rely on people who have more knowledge about the subject matter than I to keep me informed. But we're moving towards a cashless society. We can see it happening now. And ultimately, we may come to a point where fiat currency no longer exists, and we'll be heralded toward that point in time by financial crises and other things that will move us away from what we're used to and towards something that will become the new normal. So these decisions are made by people that we will never know, and they make these decisions based on something that will benefit them at the expense of the general public. So we're about to see a profound shift in the world as we know it. We're going to see a number of jobs being eradicated as robotics and AI come online. So the societies of the world as we know it are going to change dramatically. And as a consequence of that shift, we're going to see a shift as well in the political stabilities of various nations. So we see political upheaval in England now, in France, in Germany, in Italy, in the United States, in South Korea, in Syria. So we're living in an age of chaos and instability. And this situation is only going to get worse because the powers that be profit when things get worse. And that's just a reality, right? And let me, I could talk about stuff, but I also like to reference some sources that people can read to get a better understanding of what's at play. There's a book, a wonderful little book that kind of explains how the world functions. It's called Operation Manual for Spaceship Earth, written by Buckminster Fuller. Operation Manual for Spaceship Earth. Buckminster Fuller was an engineer and architect. He was the person who created the geodesic dome, a physical structure that is made of hexagon shapes that interlock, and it's designed in such a way that the larger the structure gets, the stronger it is, which contradicts architectural engineering, because usually the taller things are, the bigger things are, the more unstable they are. But the geodesic dome evenly distributes the pressure, which makes an object stronger the bigger it gets. So Buckminster Fuller was a profound thinker. And in Operation Manual for Spaceship Earth, he does a retrospective of the history of the world and talks about the fact that in every civilization, Africa, Europe, South America, you name it, you have powerful people who rise to the top and become the leaders of their clan, become kings or governors, whatever term. And these powerful people strive to maintain their power. And one of the things that they do is, one of the keys to holding on to power is to be able to control the economy and to have weapons, to develop weapons that allow you to maintain everything that you have created. And so what these kings, and Fuller lays this out in this book. So what these kings would do is they would have these scientists, these thinkers, these engineers and artists and designers to come up with new weapons and new ships. And with these bigger and stronger ships, they can now traverse more of the world. And as they travel to different parts of the world, they have new weapons that have been designed for them. They move from iron to steel. They have stronger weapons. They move from a certain type of bow to a different type of bow, a different type of arrow. They develop these various weapons, and then they travel to other parts of the world to find lands to conquer, to find resources that will maintain the power structure of a president, a governor, whoever. And as they travel to different parts of the world, as these explorers travel to different parts of the world, they they make arrangements with other powerful leaders. If their weapons are more powerful, they defeat them, and they set up this person to now work for their king. And as they set up this new kingdom, you now have to give us, sounds like the mafia, right? But this is how these structures have operated for thousands of years, right? Not just hundreds of years, but thousands of years. But here's the key. He said that every time these explorers or discoverers find a new land and set up a new puppet government, they will instruct those leaders to look for smart people, look for extraordinary thinkers, and you bring these people together. You give them whatever resources they need to do their best work. And they all work in isolation, and they all funnel their ideas, their inventions, their improvements to one central facility. And that central facility then feeds it into you. So you now look at all of these new things that have been developed, and you determine how they're going to use to help you maintain power, to help you destroy or destabilize, your enemy, so that you can continue to grow and expand. And so that's the world in which we live. And so hand in hand with that comes governments and nations and industrialists who build the weapons of war, the tanks, the bombs, the airplanes. There are billions and billions of dollars that are made off of killing people. So there's money to be made in killing people, not keeping people alive. And this is the consciousness that has functioned within the planet for thousands of years. So the issue then becomes about every 30 years or so, these societies have to retool, right? You get every generation or so, you have a new group of people who you have to work with, right? So you have to teach them, you have to educate them so that they can work in your new factories and build your tanks, build your airplanes. So there's a certain degree of education that they get that allows them to be a good employer for you. But then the people who run those institutions receive a different level of instruction, a different level of education. They become the managerial class. So you have the working class, you have the managerial class, and then you have the ruling class, which governs everything. They know where all the pieces are. They know how all the pieces fit together. So the masses of folk are kept intentionally ignorant so that they could be manipulated by the handful of people who run everything. So that's what's happening right now. So we're about to experience a hard reset. We're about to experience a shift in currency. We're about to experience a shift in the workforce, and people are now dispensable.
Wow,
they have AI. They got robotics. They don't need you anymore.
That's right. That's right.
So part of what's happening with that is the introduction of germ warfare, viral warfare, in order to depopulate certain areas to minimize resistance. That's a part of war. And that's how things have operated. So in light of this fact, the average person who knows nothing about how nations run will become fearful. And in that fear, they will do what they've been socialized to do, pray to an unseen God to help you, to protect you. But that God ain't delivered a majority of people who call out to him. And all of these gods are male figures. Why? Because we live in a male-dominated society that has been separated from the feminine creative forces. So as part of this hard reset, what will likely happen, because to get back to something you mentioned earlier, Antonio, karma is real. And what we call karma, cause and effect. You reap what you sow. They knew in the Nile Valley as ma'at, balance, harmony, order, and reciprocity. Everything that you do has to be accounted for at some point in time. And so the accounting is going to come due. And I feel very strongly it's going to come due on the incoming administration. We're going to see things fall apart. And as things fall apart, and I don't want you or your listeners to feel as though I'm the merchant of gloom and doom. I'm someone who is giving you a weather report, and the weather report says that it's a storm coming. We're gonna have 25 feet of snow. We're going to have power outages. We're going to have food shortages. Our lives are going to be disrupted for a finite period of time. So now's the time to begin to prepare yourself for what is coming. And in light of that fact, I understand very clearly that not everybody is going to make it, right? And I'm comfortable with that because I understand that life is cyclical.
Mm-hmm.
You will come back. And here's the saving grace for me. If you understand that everything is cyclical, the life comes back. We see it with the sun. The sun is born in the east every morning. It was known as Kepri. The sun reaches its highest point where at noon, where it was known as Re. The sun set in the west where it was called Amen, which means hidden or concealed. And once the sun is hidden, the symbol of the creator is hidden, they knew that it was going to be reborn in the east again. We're about to have a full moon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Full moon goes through its phases where it appears to die and then it's reborn again. So everything in the universe, the observable universe, follows this pattern. Why not human beings? We die and we are born. We live again and we die and we're born. So the body is temporary, but the spirit, the soul, is eternal. And so the soul has certain lessons to learn with each incarnation. And so the beauty of it is to realize that all of our lives are interconnected. All of our experiences, our lived experiences are interconnected. And the extent to which we're able to prosper in this life is based on the application of knowledge that we can tap into from our previous life. You know, so as I have been living my life, right, doing this work, I've come to understand why I've been so obsessed with Nile Valley civilization. And I've done things that technically I'm not supposed to be able to do. I'm not an Egyptologist. I'm not an archaeologist. You know, I'm not a classically trained historian, but I've done all of these things because I've tapped into a part of my being that has always been there, and it comes natural for me. So when I do the things that I'm supposed to do, I do them well, and I do them without having to expend a lot of effort. Why? Because I'm tapped into my ancestral
Your purpose. Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, my latest book, Finding Karaka Men, kind of details this journey, this 15-year journey of funding the archaeological excavations of what was initially 3 25th dynasty tombs on the west bank of Luxor, Egypt. I'm not an archaeologist. I'm not a fundraiser, but I've been able to raise over $3 million over the past 15 years to become the first person of African ancestry to fund an archaeological excavation in Egypt. And we have found things. We have found some incredible things that changes our relationship to the Nile Valley, that expands the limited knowledge that's available to us about Kemet or ancient Egypt. And I'm at the point in my life now where I want to be able to share this information with those deserving souls. Now, I know that this knowledge is not for everybody, and I'm at the point in my life where I'm not going to waste my time giving information to folk who can't appreciate it or can't do anything with it. So, you know, I can say this, I can share this with you, that the most important thing that came out of this 15-year experience, where we started off restoring 3 tombs, but we have found over 43 tombs, right? And each tomb that we found was built for a certain personality who lived and died over 2,700 years ago. The 3 major tombs were tombs of Kushite priests, Kushite noblemen, who were priests of Amen, who worked in Karnak Temple, Ipet Sit, on the east bank of the Nile River. Karnak Temple, or Ipet Sit, which is the original name for this structure, is the largest religious complex ever built by human beings on the planet. And these Kushite men were priests of Amen. Who is Amen? Amen represents the unseen presence of God Almighty. Amen is that personality the Jews, Christians, and Muslims acknowledge within their traditions. But what they don't acknowledge, what they don't really understand, is that Amen represents the unseen presence of the Creator. It is one aspect of a multifaceted creative force. And so the primary tomb that we have restored is the tomb of a priest by the name of Karaka Men. Karaka Men was an Ak priest at Ipet Karnak Temple. An Ak priest is the priest responsible, and we see his image, the profile of Karakamen. His job was to lead the daily procession down the central axis of the temple of Ipet and to say the words to evoke the unseen presence of God Almighty who resided in the Holy of Holies of this temple complex. And that is, he knew the words to say in order to call down the spirit of Amen, the unseen presence of God Almighty, so that the spirit of God could literally inspire, could inspirit and work through the 83,000 men and women who worked in this temple complex. All right. So I want you all to grasp the level of spiritual understanding that our ancestors had, that they restored and they amplified within the Nile Valley. And so to be able to work in restoring this tomb was a fulfillment of my life's work. And hand in hand with that, in 2012, as we completed the restoration of the Western Wall in Karakamen's temple tomb, we restored what contemporary Egyptologists refer to as a false door. Well, within the study of Nile Valley civilization, Kemet and Kush in particular, we know that this is not a false door. This was regarded as a spirit door. Spirit door is always in the western part of a tomb. Okay. And it is the doorway to the ancestral realm, right? And there were carved around this spirit door images and offerings of priests and words that these priests said as they present these offerings to Asar, who is the Lord of Resurrection. Asar was born on December the 25th, over 6,000 years ago. Asar is the first person in recorded history who died and was resurrected. He became the prototype of this other person that we now refer to as Jesus. But Jesus is a poor carbon copy of a Nile Valley personality that is imbued in myth. See, these stories are more myths than reality, but they teach scientific, philosophical, and spiritual lessons that transcend the personality. See, that's the jewel in this whole concept that as a minister friend, Christian minister friend shared with me years ago. He said, Tony, the Bible contains truth, but the Bible is not true. It's loaded with myth and allegory. One has to learn to read between the lines, to learn how not to take everything literally, how one must understand the metaphors and the powerful wisdom that is embedded in these metaphors that once they're unpacked can give you knowledge that will help you live your life. That's what all of this information is for. Wow. So, and I've been blessed to have been privy to this experience, to have gained profound insight and wisdom. But the most important thing that I can share with you from the work that I've done, the 15 years of work that we've done, is the discovery of another tomb about 2 miles north of where we've been working. It's the largest tomb in all of Egypt.
What?
Larger than tombs in the Valley of the Kings, larger than tombs in the Valley of the Queens. It's not a tomb for a ruler, a king or queen. It's a tomb of a priest of Amen who lived during the 25th dynasty. His tomb is a repository of the wisdom of Kemet and Kush. It is the best resource that contains a compilation of the best of the knowledge of the Nile Valley. That tomb is comprised of 22 different rooms that are built on 4 different levels. And this knowledge is not written on papyrus. It is literally carved in the limestone walls all throughout this tomb, right? And now get this, this tomb is large enough to accommodate over 1,000 people. So it ain't a tomb, it's a repository of knowledge. Now, give you these two pieces, and then I'll let you all sit on this for a minute. At the entrance to the tomb is a bas-relief carving of the owner of that tomb. And he has a greeting at the entrance. And essentially that greeting, paraphrasing that greeting, he says, "To you who have not been born, welcome. Come into this space. Study what is here and restore what is here. Our men will bless you if you restore what is here." Now, essentially, he wrote a message to those in the future who will be coming to this space. He wrote a message to those who lived at that time who would be reincarnated in the future, who could come to this place to restore their memory. Now, here's the kicker. Here's the kicker. Right outside of the entrance to the tomb is a vestibule, right? And painted on the ceiling of the vestibule is the Sankofa symbol, the heart-shaped Akoma Sankofa symbol. So while we've been believing that the Sankofa symbol originated among the Akan people in Ghana and the Ivory Coast or in West Africa, what I've been able to identify is the origins of this symbol in Kush, in the Nile Valley, as early as 1600 BC, right? And then just recently, back in September, I ran across another document that was also created in the Nile Valley. This particular document was created like in the 2nd century AD. This is a document, this is an image of what we refer to today as a Sankofa bird. So I can now trace the origin of this West African symbol to the Nile Valley. And the significance of this discovery is that it documents what Cheikh Anta Diop and his colleagues had theorized in the 60s and 70s. That is this cultural unity of Black Africa, and more specifically, a migration or a series of migrations of people, culture, and knowledge from the Nile River Valley to the Niger River Valley. So there were 6, Charles Finch in his latest publication, A Nile Valley Civilization, a 10,000-year history, documents in that book these 6 migrations, which occurred between 650 BC and 550 AD, when Kemetic priests realized, they saw the handwriting on the wall, and they knew that these enemies were coming, were going to continue to come into our homeland with advanced weapons that could outdo anything that we have. So this civilization is going to fall. We're going to lose everything. But some of the things that they had were too important, too valuable to allow to fall into the hands of these coming barbarians. So decisions were made to parcel up certain pieces of this information and send it further west for safekeeping. That knowledge, when it migrated to Ghana, Senegal, and Cameroon, Nigeria, and Mali, jump-started civilization, that it seeded a new consciousness and allowed West African civilizations to thrive after East African civilizations fell. So if you follow this logic, if you follow this train of thought, then these priests and priestesses, these people who had a knowledge far in advance of what we know knowledge is, could see far enough into the future to understand that eventually West Africa was going to fall. And West Africans were going to be taken across the Atlantic Ocean during the Ma'afa and settle in South America, North America, Central America, and every island in the Caribbean. And that we would be forced to forget, to lose our minds. We would forget our language, our history, our culture, our ancestral knowledge, and we would work for others who would abuse us, subject us to unimaginable horrors, and yet we will survive, right? because of something inside of us that nobody else possesses. We will survive. And while we are surviving, those among us would remember something of who we were, and that remembering would produce something that would change things for us, right? Produce it from the George Washington Carvers, the Marcus Garveys, the Malcolm X's, the Martin Luther Kings, the Rosa Parks, right? They would remember something that will allow them to do the seemingly impossible, and we would shift the mark. So we're reaching a point, we're reaching the precipice where the children of West Africa, the children of Niger, who are the descendants of the children of the Nile, who reside now within the children who live in the Potomac and the Mississippi and the Cuyahoga River and all these other things. All those ancestors dwell within us. All these memories, all of this potential exists within us. And it's our job, it's our responsibility now to remember, to engage in Sankofa, to go back and retrieve the best of the knowledge of our ancestors and use that knowledge, use that information in our lives today in order to amplify who we are, right? And prepare us and protect us from what is coming. So as I mentioned previously, we're about to face some difficult times, but we do not have to go down with the ship. We have knowledge, we have access to knowledge and power that has the capacity to save those who have the courage to expand that knowledge and use it for good and not for selfish purposes. So these are the times that we're living in now. And I feel very strongly that now is the time to begin to prepare ourselves for the rest of our lives, right? As they said, somebody said a long time ago, philosophically speaking, today is the first day of the rest of your life. Well, let me enhance that. Today is the first day of the rest of your lives. And what you do now, what we do now, how we think, how we speak, how we act, sets up what we will be able to do in our future incarnations. And as I said, most societies in the world know this. They know that we come back, right? They know that we've always come back. And so they have prepared themselves. They've lived their lives in preparation for future returns. So as the bottom falls out and people become desperate, they're going to turn away from the gods that have been assigned to them by their former enslavers. See, African people who've been colonized and enslaved have taken on the gods of our colonizers and enslavers. And those gods have not served us well because they're not ours. They're not meant to protect us. They're not meant to save us. So as we cast off those things that have failed us, we now have an opportunity to tap into those things that will sustain us. And this is the process that we're going through. And, I'm thrilled to be engaged in this process. And I'm thrilled to be able to have conversation about things that we really need to be talking about. Forget football games and basketball games. That stuff don't mean
nothing.
So there's another degree of conversation that we need to begin to have. And this conversation is not for everybody. So we need to be careful about who we talk to about these things because our lives are at stake.
Brother Tony, I think that message was left for you. I mean, you dropped something heavy on us talking about that largest tomb, and I'm hopeful and I'm trusting that the resources will be there for that to be explored and restored, and somehow you'll be connected with
Brother
it.
Vince, let me pull your coat. The powers that be will never allow that tomb to be fully explored. They would never allow that information that does exist to be disseminated to the wider public. They will never allow that. But the beauty is, it's too late. It's too late because we already have access to that information. It's already inside of us, right? We are those people who help create that information. They exist within us. So when we understand that we have access to the greatest reserve of knowledge and power that has ever existed before, it's simply a matter of embracing that. So wherever we are, we have access to that knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So it's simply about, being still during the solstices and being in the presence of other people who are also still, so that you can amplify your energy, expand your collective knowledge base, and then move in unison to restore that which was destroyed wherever you are. All right. That's the jewel. That's the opportunity that we're going to be faced with.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to amplify the idea that you expressed in that there is a power in remembering who we are. You know, you talked about us being survivors, and in spite of all the things that we've been taken through, somehow we have managed to be the creators. You mentioned George Washington Carver. He was a creative person. You can go through a whole list of folks, in spite of the enslavement, in spite of the torture, in spite of all the negativity that we went through, we still managed to be able to be creative people. And our being creative is our connection with that idea of being an aspect of God. So that's why it's so important for us to remember. And as it has been said so many times, it's dangerous to forget. But that's why they go through all that they go through, to keep our minds occupied with the sports and all that other stuff, so that we don't focus on who we are and our purpose and what we're supposed to be doing. It's amazing, Brother Tony, that you didn't have those triple degrees and all that other knowledge that comes through those things called schools, but you have managed to accomplish all that you've managed to accomplish. It is because you remember who you are, and you're doing what you are supposed to be doing, and the universe provides a way for you to do what you do. And we have to take that lesson, internalize it, all of us, to realize what we should be doing based on our knowledge and our remembering of who we are. So that was just powerful. It was so powerful.
Let me just co-sign what you just said, Vince. I ain't special. I am not special. I'm no different from you or you. I am a reflection of you. I just made specific choices in my life, which resulted in me being where I am. We always have a choice. Right? And so the key is to be willing to exercise the best choice for you, your family, and for your future lifetimes. That's the capacity that every person has. And we will find, once we free ourselves from this matrix that has been designed to keep us conceptually incarcerated, spiritually incarcerated, once we free ourselves from this matrix, we can be reintroduced to our real essence. That's when the fun begins.
You know what is I'm listening to you again, and we talked about how this is ingrained in you. Found your voice on studying this particular thing, and so I want to connect our listeners to your trip. Why London and Paris? You know what I'm trying to say? Now we talking all this Afrocentric stuff, right? I just want them to understand, see, because I have these debates with people sometime about the pathway. If it started in Africa, why has it come through Europe to get to you? You know what I'm trying to say? So what is your purpose? And to let our listeners know why the necessity, or why is it needed to go to London?
Okay. So I've been traveling to Africa for 44 years. I probably have been to Africa about 80 some odd times. 68 of those times have been to Egypt. I traveled to Egypt because that's where the oldest collection of human accomplishments exists right now. And I've been taking groups to Egypt since 1987. I've taken, over 5,000 people to Egypt over the years. And right now, the political situation in Egypt is becoming very unstable. It's becoming very much like the political situation here in the United States. The current Egyptian government has advanced a anti-Afrocentric movement, in that they see people such as myself as a threat to the economic stability of Egypt. And so I reached a point after my last tour where I said that, I'm not going to continue to take groups over, to have them spend their money in an environment where we're not appreciated. And here's the key. Here's the important thing, brother. Everybody in Egypt, every hotel owner, manager, every shop owner, every tour bus driver, every person in Egypt knows that African-American tourists in Egypt spend more money than any other tourist from any other nation on the planet.
Really?
That's real. I've seen it. I've seen it. Well, anyway, let me not get into that. So everything is about money and distribution of wealth and resources. And I don't see African Americans getting the financial benefit out of Egypt that's commensurate with what we have put into this country. So I want to pivot. I want to sit things out for a while to see where Egypt is going to go politically. But I've always loved following the footsteps of, our brother Wayne Chandler, following the footsteps of our brother and our ancestor Runoko Rashidi, that if you want to know African history, you got to visit museums. More specifically, you got to visit European museums, because there's more knowledge about Africa in Europe than there is in Africa. And so our next study tour is going to be a study tour to London and Paris, where we're going to visit the British Museum and the Louvre, two of the largest collections of Egyptian artifacts, Egyptian history in the world. The Rosetta Stone, which was used to decipher hieroglyphics, is in the British Museum. It was found by Napoleon's troops in the late 19th century, but it's in the British Museum. The Zodiac of Dendera, the astrological calendar that was in the ceiling of a temple of Dendera, is now in the Louvre. Why? Because Napoleon dynamited it from the ceiling and sent it to their museum so that they could study us. So if you want to know African people, you should travel to Europe. Do what Runoko Rashidi did, travel to museums around the world. So this upcoming study tour, July 17th through the 26th in 2025, we're going to spend about 4 days in London. We've got Robin Walker, who is a walking, talking history book, is going to be the docent for our tour of the British Museum. We're going to do a special tour, side tour of Black London, so that we can understand how Africans, continental Africans, made a way out of no way in London. And then we're going to have a lecture in the community with a British scholar and myself, where we're going to talk about history and culture. We're going to build some historical and cultural bridges. And then we're going to go to Paris and do the exact same thing. So the idea is Egypt is everywhere. We don't have to go to Egypt to study Egypt. Egypt is everywhere. Egypt is in museums all around the world. Those of you who are familiar with my work, Egypt on the Potomac, an activity which I created 36 years ago. Egypt is in the capital of the wealthiest and most powerful nation in human history. So what I'm going to do with this upcoming tour is to show those traveling with me the Nile Valley presence in different parts of the world, so that when they come back to the States, they'll have a greater awareness of who we are, who our ancestors were, and what we have the capacity to do. So it's about the continued transformation of consciousness through the study of African history and culture. And what we well know, based on the activities, based on the intentions of this incoming administration, they're shutting down the teaching of African history. They're shutting down the teaching of slavery. Why? Because they know that knowledge is power, and they want us to remain powerless. So the reality is they never should have been teaching our history in the first place. That's our responsibility. We have to use the institutions and organizations within our communities, institutions that we own. So we have to use our barbershops, our beauty shops. We have to use our homes, our schools, our churches, our Masonic lodges, our fraternities and sorority facilities to teach this information. That's our responsibility. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, during Republican administrations, Black people become so afraid that we come to our senses and realize that the onus has been on us all the time. White folk will not save you. The gods of white people or Arabs will not save you. You are responsible for saving yourself. And in order to save yourself, you must know yourself. You must know who you were before your world was turned upside down. You must engage in acts of Sankofa and retrieve the best of the knowledge of your ancestors. Study that information. Utilize that information to make your life better. That's your responsibility. That's why we are here. So, for the time that I have left on this planet, that's what I'm going to be devoting my life to doing, and hopefully demonstrating to others how to live and how to live a life that is absence of fear, how to live a life where you maximize your health, your responsibility to this vessel that through which the ancestors worked through. If we say that we're God, how can we say we're God when we're sick most of the time, when we're obese, when we have all of these illnesses that we should be able to minimize based on aligning ourselves with the natural order of healing? So we have to put this knowledge to the test. And my philosophy has been, the knowledge that you say you believe in cannot be used to improve the quality of your life in a measurable capacity. You need to throw that knowledge away. If the God that you believe in cannot improve the quality of your life such that you don't have to pray for health, you don't have to pray for wealth, you know what to do, you know how to apply the teachings such that you have what you need, and you don't have to beg God for anything. We're here as creators, right? We have the capacity to create whatever we desire. The question has always been, what do we desire? Right? Why do we desire those things? So, as we are reaching a turning point, a pivot in this society, we're seeing the people that we have been socialized to put on pedestals. We're seeing the pedestals knocked off from underneath them and them falling hard. We're seeing P. Diddy fall. We're going to see a whole lot of other folk fall. Why? Because they were placed on these pedestals because they were going to lead us straight to the gates of hell. Right? And we have to learn to know ourselves, to love ourselves, to know that we are the repository for all of the ancestors who lived along our family line, that they express themselves through us. So we have to be good custodians of the ancestral spirits that have always been here to protect us, to inspire us, to guide us, and accept that, embrace that. And to the extent to which we do that is the extent to which we will see the quality of our lives dramatically improve, and know that we live in a society that is antithetical to all of that. So they are going to continue to do everything within their power to keep us disconnected from our only true source of power. So don't be confused. Don't be manipulated by the liars, who are the best liars the world has ever seen. This last presidential election last month demonstrated the power of lies, power of deceit, right? And for those that want that, have at it. It's your life. It's your choice. Have at it. But stay out of my way. I have I've made different choices for how I'm going to live my life. stay out of my way. You do your thing. I would do mine. And at the end of this life, we will know who did theirs the best.
Hey, Tony,
Yes,
it
sir.
isn't like you haven't already blown our little wig off on today. It was beautiful, man, beautiful. And you validated so much stuff for me. I know some of my friends that may be listening. They know I you just validated that, brother. I needed that. Thank you very much on that. But I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit, and we're gonna continue to blow some wigs back. You blew minds away when you was in Cleveland and you had your time what's
Oh,
that
the
time
timeline. Mhm.
timeline when you had the timeline and you said something. And Vince, you was there too as well. And you said something about when they discovered, everybody had the theory of, okay, where our European friends come from,
Mhm.
and how old is our European
Ah.
friends, you know what I'm trying to say. And so when what you said, and I went and looked up when they discovered the body, was about 4,000 years or so ago, and they found out the Iceman had, they uh, been found and found the melanated man. Could you kind of tap into that a little bit, and your theory on where does man come from?
All right. Well, it ain't a theory, it's a fact, right?
Yeah.
It's a scientifically, genetically proven fact. As a matter of fact, I just saw an article yesterday where they further expanded on that research as to how the European came to be. So if it is true that humanity began in Africa and that the first human beings walked out of Africa and populated Asia and Europe, then the question comes up, how did other people come about? And that process is referred to as speciation. It's a matter of adaptation to climatic environments. So the Africans who were living in the landmass that we call Europe were trapped um, during the Warmian Ice Age, the last major ice age. And within that cold environment, our melanated skin became a disadvantage because we're exposed to less sunlight. And as a result of us getting less sunlight, we developed rickets, and those people who were heavily melanated died. And so as a result of adaptation to this new environment, we had to lose our melanin in order to get sunlight, in order to get vitamin D so we could build a strong skeletal system. Um, Within a hot tropical environment, we have short, curly hair. And our hair is curly so that our brains can cool so we don't die of a stroke. Well, in a cold environment, you need straight, long hair to insulate your body to keep the heat inside. So there's been these explanations to explain the physiological differences between the traditional African personality and the traditional European personality. So geneticists have been able to identify when Africans living in Europe lost their melanin and mutated to become the people now classified as Caucasians. And geneticists said that that mutation, that genetic mutation occurred between 7 to 8,000 years ago. So in other words, what scientists have proven is that the person classified as Caucasian, i.e. the white man, has only been on this planet 7 to 8,000 years ago. So let's give them 8,000 years. Let's compare that 8,000 years to the 300,000 years that we know that Africans have been living on this planet as Homo sapiens sapien, as so-called modern man, which means that African people have a 292,000 year head start on Europeans. So embedded within us, embedded within our DNA is the genetic memory of those ancestors going back tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. That's knowledge that we should be tapping into as opposed to the information that's being spoon-fed to us by folk who've only been on the planet 7 to 8,000 years. It just makes good sense. But good sense is a difficult to come by commodity nowadays. Common sense ain't that common. And so we're going through a period where there's going to be a shift in power, a shift in education, a shift in spiritual systems. So we're at the beginning of that shift now And to be honest with you, that shift is going to take about a couple of 100 years before it sets in. You know, when the seasons change from fall into winter, it doesn't automatically become winter. You don't get a ton of snow and temperatures below freezing. It waxes and wanes. But there's a period where you will have winter, and then that period will slowly give way to spring. And then once spring comes, then life will come back out of the earth, and the birds will start building nests and animals will begin to propagate again. That's a regular cycle. So we're going through the same cycle a bit on a larger scale, a cycle that is being measured in hundreds of years, not cycles of 90 days. So if you have a larger historical context, you can now see time in terms of hundreds of years or thousands of years instead of days. And once you gain that broader perspective, that gives you a sense of peace, because you aren't fearful of what's happening right now, because you know what's going to be happening 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, right? And so we are part of this continuum that really has to do with the expansion and evolution of human consciousness. Because I feel very strongly, you know, I don't mind saying it, I'm 78 years old, right? And I've been around the sun long enough to have an understanding of how this world works. And what I could tell you is that this whole thing about race is a game. There's no such thing as race. Race was a false construct created by racists in order to divide and rule people by people without a soul, right? And so this thing about race really is a limiting energy or consciousness. It represents a minimum consciousness. We are, in fact, spiritual beings living in a physical body, and that we come to earth in order to create things on a material plane. But we are, in fact, and Wayne in his talk last week was referencing this, and I was so pleased to hear him and to see him do this. He started off talking about the difficulties that were coming with the collapse of the economy and the illnesses and viruses that are going to proliferate. But he ended by talking about the spiritual force that exists within all of us, and that we are, in fact, spiritual beings, and we come to earth to create. And so we're moving through a cycle of intense destruction that has been wrought by male chauvinistic murder cults that have been running amok. That is coming to an end, and it's going to phase into the return of what Charles French refers to as the cosmic mother. It's a shift in consciousness. And once that shift occurs, there is going to be more balance in how we function as spiritual beings having a human experience. So we will have the opportunity, I feel, to experience great prosperity. But I also understand, given the cyclical nature of everything, that ain't going to last forever, right? And so we've come here to experience things, and I can't help but understand and appreciate the fact that, as Earth, Wind, and Fire said in one of their songs, yearn and learn is what we do. We've come here to grow. We come here to expand. And so there may possibly be, I don't have enough data to speak intelligently on this subject matter. I'm just postulating now, theorizing now. There must be other levels of existence that transcend this physical level, where we as spiritual beings can inhabit that realm and experience another dimension of this thing that we call life. And that's how we grow. That's how we evolve. Embracing that thought helps me sleep at night and gives me something to look forward to every morning. And I can't help but feel that is where humanity is moving. We just have to get through this difficult period now, this dark period, before we start seeing the light. And once we step into the light, hopefully we can start doing things correctly for a sustained period of time, where we will reap the benefits in future lifetimes to come.
Beautiful.
Wow. I don't know about you, Brother Antonio, but I am full. I'm packed to the gill. Brother Tony been dropping it on us.
Absolutely, brother. And before we let you go, cause see, I don't get you too many times, so I'm gonna use you up for a second. But I sure appreciate your time that you're giving us, brother. We in this time. We talked about the whole December 25th thing, and but we know what comes after that. Just briefly, this new year, this man gave us this new year, and folks gonna lose their mind on that and believe in it. You know, I've been trying to tell them, even in their own doctrine, if they would just go, even look at a Hebrew calendar, it talks about the month of Abib and talk about spring and the beginnings and things of that nature. So they got us all hyped up in this dead season talking about a new year. Your thoughts?
Well, listen, every day is a new day. Right? Mm-hmm. There are multiple calendars used by different cultures and different religions all over the planet. So it's about orienting yourself not just to earth time, but to cosmic time. Right?
Yeah.
And so this is a season of renewal, right? And so if you align yourself to this season, I feel very strongly that you'll be directed, you'll be guided to do what is best for your continued development. And the other thing, Antonio, is that you got to stop talking with those folk who can't understand. You're wasting your time, brother. Your time is too precious to spend with folk who don't understand or appreciate what you have to offer. We need to start building with people worth building with, right? And I'm not being prejudiced. I'm just acknowledging what is. So I'm at the point in my life where, I've been studying African history and culture and doing all these things, but there are things that I want to talk about now that I haven't been able to talk about. So it's about cultivating an audience that allows me to expand the conversation, because we have to move beyond this limited space, this limited mental prison that has a moat of fear surrounding it, where we've grown comfortable with existing and thinking that we were living. There's a better way to do this thing called life. And as we move forward and experience opportunities to live a better quality of life, we will find that probably 97% of the folk we know aren't capable of doing that. Right? That's okay. I'm not being judgmental. I'm just acknowledging where things are. And I choose to spend my time with people that I know can appreciate what I have to offer, with the desire that with an elevated consciousness, we can now build something together that will be more than what we could have built individually. That's what these times represent to me. It's an opportunity for building, not arguing, not fighting, not debating. I love what Dr. Clark said. I only debate my equals. All others I teach, right? It's a time for teaching, and you can only teach those who are ready to be taught. And you're not really putting information in them. You're helping them remove the roadblocks, the impediments, so that they can bring out that which has always been inside of them, waiting to be freed, so that they can empower themselves and become the creators that they were born to create. So that's what time it is. And, I thank you all for this opportunity to share a message that I will be crafting and presenting to more audiences as time permits.
All right.
But you also working on some documentaries. You talked about some documentaries that you're going to be putting out.
I'm working on a couple of books. I got a new book that has been delayed because of some other work that I'm doing. Browder File Volume 3, Why Kemet Matters. That will be out in the spring. We've got a new project that I'm really excited about called the John Henry Clark Enhanced History Project. That piece will be coming out. The opening of that exhibition will be on March 22nd, a little more than 90 days from now. So everything is happening. There's no such thing as chance, coincidence, or accident in the universe ruled by law and divine order. everything happens for a reason. Everything happens in its own time. And it's simply a matter of us aligning ourselves to the forces within the universe so that we can be the vessels for the best presentation of what it is that we're supposed to be doing. So you're going to see my best work coming. And I look forward to building with you brothers in the future.
All right. I'd like to just share a poem that references something that Brother Tony brought up a few moments ago. This is a poem that I wrote called Know, Love, Be. To know yourself is to know what no one wants you to say to yourself or out loud. To know yourself is to know God. To love yourself is to love God. To be yourself is to be an aspect of God. To do all three is to be a universe, a verse of one under the sun, in the midst of the moon, stars, and planets, a verse of one navigating the galaxies in space and multiple dimensions, a verse of one among many called humanity, living as one, differently one, similarly one, loving as one, surviving as one, thriving as one, winning as one. Know yourself, love yourself, be yourself.
I say.
Right on.
Say.
Well, we
Peace and
appreciate
blessings,
you, my
everyone.
good brother.
Yes.
You know, hopefully, go ahead, Vince. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thank you again, thanking Brother Browder again for coming on and imparting some plethora of information. We sure appreciate you, and I hope our listeners got a lot out of that. I know I did. It was beautiful, brother. Great, brilliant job. Great, and keep on with the work. And you still dealing with any donations of what you're trying to do, your projects or something?
Well, we're getting ready to ship. We are basically done with the work that we were doing in Egypt.
Okay.
And it's important to take care of business at home. We got stuff at home we need to be dealing with.
Okay.
And so the Clark project that we're going to be unveiling in March will introduce the next phase of the work that we're going to be doing. And one of the things that we're looking at setting up in operation is what we refer to as the Cultural Imperative Initiative, where we will put together a program, a curriculum, if you will, that folk can utilize in their community, in their homes, in their schools, in order to amplify the types of things that I've been talking about with you brothers today. So we're putting together the material. We're going to make it as user-friendly as possible to be shared with those people who are interested in expanding their presence here on Earth. And that will be our continued contribution.
Okay.
All right?
All right.
All right. We'll be in touch. Thank you, brothers. You all stay safe and have a phenomenal new year.
Yeah, same
All
to
right.
you, my brother.
All right.
Hotel.
Okay.
Okay.
Hotel. Sign out.
Okay. All right. Okay.